Welcome back to Most Self-Improved, a podcast where we're trying to live each day a little bit better than the last. I'm Bobna Chilakori with my co-host, Erin Jensen.
Hi.
And for this episode, we're speaking with Stacy Kim, a social scientist, career and family coach, and a writer. And I'm super excited because we're talking about a topic that is really universal and also feels like something we avoid talking about, which is envy. It's an emotion that nobody likes to feel, but we all do.
What are you envious of? Or when are you finding these feelings of envy come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's differed at different points in life based on what I didn't have, to be honest. So, like right now, sometimes I'll see someone and they'll be just super accomplished. They're the CEO of their organization. There are people our age that are in charge of their entire organization. And I'm like, wow, how did this person get to be in charge of the whole? Could I do that? That's something I think I'd like to do, but I don't even know.
Why haven't I done it?
Yeah, why haven't I done it? I don't even see a path to that right now. They did it in 38 years. I've also been alive that amount of time. And so that's what it's like now. But in the past, I've definitely been to a wedding and felt some things other than pure joy.
Okay. But wasn't that during the breakup? That was included.
No, it's never like, oh, I wish this person shouldn't be getting married. It was never toxic to that level, but it was like, oh my gosh, this would be really great to have. All it is to me is you just want something that everybody else seems to have or one other person seems to have, and you just don't have it and you want it, which is a painful feeling. And so it's definitely a thing for me.
Here's what I feel like it's so hard to find people really to connect with, but also I feel like no one wants to hear you complain about it. I don't
complain about it.
But you know, but you said like people don't talk about it. I was at a birthday dinner a couple weeks ago, mine, obviously extending it to forever. And my friend is also single. She's a year older than me. And I was like, well, do you ever get sad that you're single? And she's like, oh, yeah, but I just have to compartmentalize it or else I'll just be sad all the time. And it's like, well, thank you for talking to me because it just felt like it was me. Like, it's just me and I'm alone. So I think it's hard to talk because people don't want to hear you complain.
No, I agree with you.
It is. It's interesting. It is, like you said, it's not a conversation I have a lot. I think I don't know how to express it, or nor do I feel like people want to hear it. I think
yeah.
No,
you're probably right. I think it's there for a lot of people in different contexts, big and small. But it's like the idea is, envy is super uncomfortable. It's seen as a sin. It's seen as something you're not supposed to feel. But what if we kind of flip that and say, okay, what is this trying to tell you about what you want? How can it help you get the life that you want?
Yeah, I think even in Bold Move, I think that the author talked about that. Let your envy be a source of inspiration or a little notification for you. Like, this is what we want. Let's go after this. And it's an interesting emotion, I think is interesting. Because there's all something we want. Why do we have to feel bad?
Why do we have to feel bad? You don't. You shouldn't. Don't feel bad. Stacy's going to help us not feel bad. So let's get started by welcoming Stacy to the podcast. Well, we're so excited to speak with you today, Stacy. I'm just really excited because we're talking about a topic today that feels really universal to me, but also feels like something we all avoid talking about.
Yes.
So envy is an emotion I would venture none of us really like to feel, but we do anyway. I really loved your article in the Washington Post about how you thought about envy and how it helped you.
Yeah.
To start, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
I am a life coach and a writer and a former social scientist. So I love coaching high achieving, big hearted people, the smart and caring, I call them.
Hello. We're so nice to be here.
That's right. And I started out because I did a lot of research in work and the arena of career and family. And of course, you always work on yourself. So that was the kind of research that I did. And then when I had kids, I realized, okay, I really can't be the parent that I want to be and also have the career that was fulfilling to me. Slowly, I thought I was going to start coaching women on parenting, but the women that came to me were so bright and so smart and so caring, and they were already good moms. And so that's how I evolved to coaching high achieving women. And then now just mostly women, but really anyone who's a high achiever, but also a big heart, has a big heart because they are trying to take care of people. And that's where the work and family conflict comes in. And in the process of coaching so many high achievers, I realized that envy was an emotion that people didn't really want to talk about. At the same time, growing up Korean, people do talk about their envy a little bit more. So I've been fascinated with this topic for a long, long time, and interviewing people and reading more about it, reading the research behind it, really helped me understand, oh yeah, it makes total sense because high achievers feel envy the most maybe, but it is a universal emotion. It is something that everyone feels. It is so natural. And yet, because it is a negative emotion, because it doesn't make us feel good, it makes us feel a lot of different yucky stuff. We don't want to think about it. Don't want to talk about it. And so we suppress it. And I think, especially in the Western world, I think because envy is considered a sin, it becomes even more taboo.
I am so curious about now just your work with high achieving women. There's so much there. But just to start with the basics around envy, what exactly is envy?
I'm glad you asked that question because I define it the way researchers define it. And it's basically wanting anything that somebody else has that you don't have. We use envy interchangeably with jealousy, but jealousy involves a third person. For example, I might be jealous when my husband looks at another woman, but I would be envious of her good looks, right? Because she has that, I don't, or I think I don't, or something like that. So envy is simply wanting what other people have that you think that you don't have. And so it involves a comparison, and it makes us feel bad because we feel inferior. It also makes us feel a little bit shame because we're supposed to not compare other people to ourselves. It can be benign, or there's a positive side where, oh, I envy that person. I want to become like that person. So there's a positive, or what's called benign envy. A more toxic envy is like, I don't want you to have what you have that I want that I don't have, right? So then that becomes a little bit more toxic.
And I appreciate that so much because when Bhavna came up with wanting to do this topic, and I was like, I don't really feel, because I thought you had to have, like you were saying, the component of, I don't think they deserve it. There are certainly things that I want that my friends have, but I'm never like, ew, I should have, they shouldn't have it. So it's very interesting to hear.
What's fascinating about envy is that we envy usually what's within our reach or something that's important to us. The example that I like to use is if you're a young cellist and you're second chair in your youth orchestra, you're going to envy your first chair. That's somebody who's close to you. You're not going to envy Yo-Yo Ma because Yo-Yo Ma's like way up there. It's too high a reach, right? But it's going to really bug you when your first chair gets first chair and you don't, or gets to play that piece or that solo. And you're not even going to care about your friend who's a tennis player, right? Because you don't care about tennis. So envy is very informative.
That's so interesting. And when you were giving your introduction, another thing that stood out to me when you said in Korean culture that you talk more about it and then here it feels more taboo. Can you tell me a little bit about what the difference is there?
So, for example, just the word envy in Korean, I think, is called 부러워 or 부러워요. It combines both envy and admiration, and it's aspirational. And so it's more of that benign envy than it is of the toxic envy. And in order to envy, you compare. And that's so often done. Like I talk to my Korean friends and I say, oh, yeah, don't you feel like your parents compared you to everybody else in the world? And they were like, yes. Why can't you play piano like her? Or why can't you get good grades in math like him? And that's a constant kind of open comparison. So I was born in Korea, brought over as a baby, and then I moved back when I was 10. And that was in the 70s. And it was a time when there was a military regime. And it was also after Korea was still trying to rebuild itself after the Korean War and after World War II and things like that, and after the long occupation that the Japanese had. And so this whole country talked a lot about needing to rise and become, get away from being a third world country, needing to become more wealthy, become more educated. And that was something that was talked about a lot. And also, it was the way in which people were often motivated was, we have to beat Japan. We have to beat our oppressors. And if you think about it, Japan is a similarly sized country and it's right next door, right across the sea. So it's somebody close to you, somebody that you could compete with. And so that was really talked about a lot. You would turn on the TV or your teachers would talk about, oh, we have to beat Japan. You have to study hard so we can someday rise as a country together. So it was really in the conversation about comparing and the envy that you had. And so I wouldn't say it's a national obsession, but it's just kind of ingrained in the culture. And so you talk about it more openly. Here, though, I think it's very much like, oh no, envy's a sin. I don't envy. I'll talk to people now and they'll go, I never envy. And I'll say, I think you do, but you're not
I
aware
never
of
believe
it.
those people.
Yeah. It's okay because it's a tough emotion. It's really, even though I learn about it and I see it in my clients and I study it, when I have that pang of envy, I mean, it just can eat you up inside and it can linger and stay and it doesn't feel good and can put you in a bad mood. And I think that that's all normal. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that there's an element of envy that's about unfairness and injustice. Yeah. In the cellist example, you could say, oh my gosh, I practiced for so long and it feels like she's just a natural. That's not fair. And I'll say Erin's a better person than me. I go beyond the benign envy. Not like quite into the toxic, but if I feel like I've worked really hard for something,
Absolutely.
or I really want something and it looks like it's coming easy to other people, there's an element of, it's not easy to say or admit, but it's like a little bit of self-pity, like what is going on? And so I'm just curious, what do you do to help people get past that sense of, that's not fair? What about me? Which isn't a great place to be.
It's really hard. I think, first of all, just knowing that envy is normal and that it's natural. We have to compare ourselves with other people in order to know who we are. And we're social beings. And there's this thing called mimetic desire. We even learn what we should want through other people. We're just humans. We're wired that way. So we're going to compare. It's just natural to do. And so knowing that this is something that's very universal and natural, and that everybody does it. Even the person that you envy is doing that. I remember when I first started out, these women would come into my office and I'd be like, oh my gosh, why is this person here? She's beautiful. She has a great career. Her kids, I know she's admired. Her kids are great and all of this stuff. And I'm like, why is this person here? And then she'll start talking and I'm like, oh my gosh, she's thinking the same things I do. Or, oh, she has problems that I didn't know that even could exist. And so I think the first thing to remember is that we're kind of all in this world doing the same kinds of things. We're not that different from other people. So having that compassion both for yourself and for the other people, I mean, I think that's something to understand. And then you also don't know what's going on. You don't know their whole story. That's something that I say to my kids a lot. That's what I tell myself a lot. You don't know their whole story. I'm just seeing one part of them. And it's not to try to put them down and say, oh, they're probably really bad at blah, 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 which is also easy to do. It's really more of a, well, I don't know how much that person has been working so hard. I know how much I worked hard. I don't know how much that person's working hard. And even before that, just saying, of course I feel envious. Of course I feel angry. Of course I feel a sense of unfairness. Acknowledging those feelings. So first, understanding that, okay, this happens to everyone. And then to say, oh, this is normal. And then saying, of course I feel that way. And I think that's what I mean by self-compassion, is to be able to say, yeah, I worked really hard and I didn't get that thing that I wanted. And that really sucks. And of course I feel upset. And of course I feel envious that she got it and I didn't. Validating those feelings for yourself, that's really helpful. And then when you start to feel a little bit better, saying, okay, well, what is it that I envy? And then what is it that I could do? And what is it that I cannot do? I can't be exactly like that person, but I can emulate these kinds of things. I often find that really high achieving women don't know what they want. And so envy can often tell you what it is that you really want. And so that's something to look at. If we envy money or possessions, usually it's not the money and the possessions. I think it's the feelings that you think that those things will give you. For example, sometimes a client will envy somebody else's money, but it's not really the money that they're envious of. It's oh, I wish I had the money to be able to have the freedom to do what I wanted. Or I wish I had the money so that I could feel more confident in myself. I wish I had that higher salary because then that would make me feel better. And I just want to feel good about where I am at. So when it's possessions or money or things, envying those things can kind of lead you astray. What you want to do is you want to look at what's behind that. And I think the big part is suppressing your envy or pretending that it doesn't exist. Not only do you miss out on an opportunity, but whenever you suppress a negative emotion, it seeps out. So what you want to do is you want to kind of tame that by examining it. When I say good versus bad, it's what you do with that envy. Because I think everyone's going to feel it. But then what do you do with it? And when you feel something bad, it's usually your body telling you or your mind, hey, there's something wrong here. And so listening to that alarm bell is really helpful. And then what you do with it, that's the next step.
And I'd love to get into that because when you said earlier, it can eat away at you, that really stuck with me. Because you look on Instagram and, oh, I don't look like this, or, oh, I don't have this, or whatever it is. And then I get sad, like, oh, well, what's wrong with me that I do not have whatever they have? Or even the things that I want separate, a book or a more popular whatever it is. So then how do you deal with that whenever it comes up in a positive way? So you're not suppressing it.
Let's say you're scrolling on Instagram and you see something or you see lots of different things, and that algorithm is going to keep feeding you with things that you're interested in, and therefore things that you can easily be envious of. And so if you're not aware of that, you can start feeling bad about yourself very quickly. And so that's another reason why I think it's so important to look at your envies. When you start to feel bad, just take a pause and say, well, what is it that I'm feeling right now? And try to label it. Try to say, okay, I am feeling envy. And what am I envious of? I'm envious of this. And why is that making me feel so bad? Well, usually it's because it's within your reach. And, it's telling you, oh, you should be able to do this, but you're not doing it. So what's wrong with you? Right? So that's kind of where the bad feelings come from, because it's always somebody just right above you that you're going to feel most envious about.
So then what do we do with the bad feelings then? Don't just leave us there.
No. So what you can do is you can start to think about, okay, what is it that I want and how do I get there? Give me an example of something that you're envious of. Let's try.
Okay. We'd love to get more listeners on this podcast. Okay. And so when you're going through and it's like, I would love for thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to listen to this podcast. So then I get the feelings of, well, why aren't you doing it? Why can't you do it? Are you not good at this? And should you even be doing this? And so then when you're like, okay, well, how can you? I don't know how I can do it. That's the problem that I'm in now.
Yes. So I think the podcasting is a great example. You want to get more listeners, right? And you want your podcast to grow. And so what you're seeing is these other podcasts that are doing great. And so it makes you feel bad. So one thing that you can start to do is say, okay, well, what is a podcast that's within my reach? What is something that's right above me? And then I would say study that podcast or study a bunch of them. Podcasts that you really like, that you want to emulate, and then study them. And then the other part is see if that you can talk to somebody about it. So you want to befriend them and say, hey, can you tell me, how did you get from this point to this point? Or how do you decide on your topics? Or what is it that you can do? Those are concrete things that you can work on that's within your reach. That is something that's within your control too. If, say, Reese Witherspoon had a podcast, well, she's already famous. So you can't already become an actor and then a famous producer and then have a podcast like hers. That's not very fruitful to compare yourself with. But if you go and look for other podcasters who are doing well that maybe had the same network as you did. And I would just go there and like study, okay, well, what is it they're doing that's doing it right? And maybe listen to a bunch of podcasts and say, okay, well, is that an idea that I can steal, or how can I make it mine? And I would say start small, just do a little bit at a time, and then let yourself learn how to go about doing that.
How are you finding what you truly, really want for your life and should be putting your energy towards?
You can't really silence all those other voices. Those voices are going to be there. You're not going to silence that envy. So let it guide you. And what I would say is, what is it that we really want? Basically, most humans want relationships and deep connections with people that we really care about. And then the other part is we want to do something that makes us feel like we matter, like the work that we do. And when I say work, it doesn't necessarily mean career. It could be volunteer work. It could be starting up a business or whatever it is. It's the activities that we do that we want to be meaningful to us. We want it to matter in the world. And those are the two things. So that's why I'm so focused on career and family, or work and family, or I call it pursuits and people. So those are the two things. And so when you do feel envy, or when you do feel all the wants, and when you feel the shoulds, that's another thing to pay attention to. When you feel all of those things, ask yourself, okay, does this help me deepen my connections with the people that I care about? Or does this help me do the kind of work that I find intrinsically interesting?
Because you are working with these high achieving women, I can't let it go. In addition to envy, are there any other common problems you're seeing that people are facing or trying to work through?
Procrastination and perfection. Those are two things.
It's if I may say so, Bob, it's me and you.
Procrastination.
Yeah, it's me and you. I wasn't going to call you out, but I was like, oh, it's us.
Those are things that always come up, and confidence is always behind there. Often people come to me because they're like, I'm too busy to do blah, blah, blah. So time management. Those are themes that come up in my practice all the time, and they're all intertwined. And they're topics that I've had to deal with myself. So it's like I have the pleasure of talking to people and then working on myself too. So yeah.
I love that. So then thinking of those, or thinking of envy, is there anything else that you want to leave our audience with? Anything else that they should know before we conclude our conversation today?
One of the things that I tell high achieving women, and especially in their 20s and 30s, is you've got this. You really have achieved so much already. And so don't look at what's next, what isn't there. Really try hard to look at what's going right. Our brains are wired to look at the negative, to look at what's absent, what's not there. That's a lot of what I do on my coaching calls, is to make sure that people remember there's a lot going right here. Look at what's going right. I have a bed to sleep in. It can sound trite, but all of those little things, you have to work and train your brain to do that. And so if I could leave high achievers with that message, if everyone could just really lean into that, I think we'd all be a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more at ease. And so just look at all the things that are going right in your lives, because I know you both are beautiful, successful women who are just sharing your gifts and sharing all of this knowledge with so many other people. And wow, that's really wonderful. So congratulations. I think it's wonderful.
Thanks, Stacy.
Oh, you're welcome. You're
No
welcome.
wonder I want to work with you.
I mean, I wasn't doing this stuff when I was your age. I'm in my 50s. So like, oh my gosh, the fact that you're doing all of this now, I mean, that's awesome. And doing all this self-reflection, I mean, that's really awesome. So congratulations.
You're so kind. Yeah, it's out of desperation. Where can we find you online for more of your positivity?
Just find me on lifejunctions.com.
Amazing.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
No, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your thoughts on envy and everything
thank you for
else.
having me. This is so much fun.
At the end of the podcast, we always do a little thing where we just share what we learned. So I'd love to know, Erin, what's one thing you're going to take away from our chat today?
The first thing, which I know we've already talked about this, but just the emphasis on what's really going to make us happy. What we should be focusing on is not what everyone else has on Instagram, but are we creating those meaningful relationships, and does our work have meaning? I just feel so lost of like, what are we doing? Is it making an impact? My life doesn't look like other people's, which, as I've learned today, is envy. So I think I will take away the definition of envy, and I will take away that of just running my own race and focusing on the things that are actually important. What about you?
I just loved how real you were, Stacy. And something I hear
When
a
she
lot
was
is like,
complimenting us and saying we're
yes.
beautiful. I did feel that was authentic. I felt that was authentic.
You hear a lot of don't compare. And I think you said something like, we're human beings. You're going to do that, which is really nice to have that permission of, okay, I'm not crazy for doing this. It's very natural because I think the advice comparison is the thief of joy. We know that's true and we're still human. And so just the self-compassion aspect of what you spoke about of it's going to happen and it's okay. It's what you do with it that matters feels very important because I think without that you end up in the suppression, which I have done. And it does come out in very bad ways, very bad ways at the wrong time. Many stories about that.
That's
and
right.
So, yeah, giving yourself that permission to feel and knowing that it's normal. That's my big takeaway. But thank you so much. And to everyone who tuned in, thank you for joining us. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out and follow us on Instagram at Most Self Improved, all one word. And tell us all the ways that you're making envy work for you. Thanks for tuning in and have a great week.